Hello, everybody. This is the Indie Grounds podcast, ready and here for a new episode. I'm so excited to talk about it. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to everybody that has subscribed and those who have been here since the beginning. I can't believe how much support I've gotten on this channel just talking about music, and the comments are amazing. Just the overall support, I just can't believe it. So thank you so much for listening. And, I really hope that I can do my best to provide some kind of entertainment for you and to bring up maybe an artist that you haven't listened to for a while, somebody that you just feel like needs more recognition, some spotlight that you could be put on them. So thank you so much again. And this week's episode is a little bit similar to the episode that I did a while back on Bo Burnham, and that this is a YouTube creator. Now, I know what you're thinking. A lot of times with YouTube creators, they break into the mainstream and they are instantly popular. So, you may say to yourself, well, is this really indie music? And I just have such a soft spot for YouTube. Before I've made this channel, I watched more YouTube than television, especially in recent years. I'd say the past 5 years or so, maybe even a little longer, it's heavily over, time. I've spent so much time watching YouTube rather than television. And to see a YouTuber become successful, even if they go through mainstream channels, is just different for me than, somebody who's a musician, they get hired onto a record label, especially the journey that they have to go through, where with Bo Burnham and then Joji, who I'm talking about today, it's like they spend years creating content by themselves and creating this massive following before they even get to the music scene. So to me, it's just a little bit different. You can argue against it, and I even understand the argue against it, but again, I think it's just something to see somebody make something of themselves and then get recognized versus kind of just immediately going into the music scene. So who is Joji? For those who are, not aware, maybe you've just kind of seen him around, but you haven't listened to his music. You don't know where he is, where he came from. Joji was one of the, I guess you could call early days, the OG YouTuber. You have to think of YouTube back in the mid 2010s. It became very popular for a different reason, because the initial years of YouTube were all kind of the same. These weird videos where nobody really knew what YouTube was yet. And then in the mid 2010s, it changed to kind of like shock humor, right? Where creators purposely were saying and doing things for shock value. And that's where Joji first came into play. He had several characters that he would do. One of them is Pink Guy, and then, of course, Filthy Frank. And he also, if you remember, there was a song back then called the Harlem Shake where, a person would just randomly start dancing by themselves, and then a cutscene would reveal them doing something crazy with a huge group of people. And Joji made that popular. He was one of the first people that made a video of the Harlem Shake. He wasn't the very first one, but he was one of the first ones. And, he instantly gained a massive following online on YouTube. And he just started to create that shock value. He would comment on social issues, on issues of race. And he would do some crazy things, and a lot of controversy as well. A lot of people were not big fans of him at first. And he himself was one of the first people to kind of realize that he didn't want to create keep creating this shock value forever. You know, he didn't even want to keep this YouTube career going forever. And he does have a lot of love for YouTube. You know, he's not one of those people where he's kind of turned his back on it or anything like that, but he was ready for something bigger and better, you know, than what he was doing. Because I mentioned one of his characters that he did, Pink Eye. That's where his start was in creating music, was that character, because he created music under that character. In fact, he made an album called Pink Season in 2017, where he had 35 songs during his YouTube career that he had made during his time on YouTube, essentially. And Filthy Frank, his other character, was even used to promote that album. Now, of course, that album was mostly a joke album, you know, right? It wasn't meant to be serious or anything like that, but you could say it really prepped him for what was to come, because he sent it out there, and it was almost his way of seeing what was going to happen if he were to release music. And of course, his fans loved it. You know, they just ate it up. It broke into the Billboard 200. So he got to see firsthand, hey, I kind of have something here. And then at the end of 2017 now, December 2017, he actually sent out a small letter to his fans saying that he was ceasing production of all Filthy Frank related content and Pink Eye music content. And in the letter, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but his reasoning was kind of twofold. Number one, he said it was playing and wreaking havoc on his health. You know, because for the Filthy Frank character, he had to use kind of like a gravelly sounding voice that he would use for that character, which was not his voice. And he said like it would just destroy him making that sound. So that was number one. He also said some neurological damage as well. He didn't quite go into specifics there, but he cited that as well. But number two, kind of what I was mentioning earlier, he was just kind of done. You know, the character had served his purpose, and now seeing that his fans would support his music career, he wanted to do it, and he wanted to make actual serious and traditional music as well. Which, you know, again, was another big leap, but he wanted to do things that he was interested in, right? You know, just like anybody. Now, Joji is also a stage name as well. So, in Japan, he produced and sang songs just to kind of pass the time as a hobby. And then after he moved to New York, he wanted to expand his music career as well. So that's what he did. You know, he made that Pink album, right, that I mentioned, and then he got into the studio and he wanted to make music under his name Joji, which is what he did. So he got signed under a music label, 88 Rising or 88 Rising in 2017. He released a lot of singles under that name, and he started to gain some traction, you know, under Spotify and iTunes. His debut project was called In Tongues, which was released at the end of 2017, now in November. And it kind of had some remixes, some songs that he already released. And it did pretty decently, you know, but in 2019, he hinted at what was to come, where I would say one of his first biggest singles, Sanctuary, he started to hint at in June 2019. And in January 2020, he released another single called Run, which was, you know, extremely popular as well. And that was really to along with, of course, the huge single Slow Dancing in the Dark, really started to gain him traction. Now, Slow Dancing in the Dark was not on this album, but I think it was just really signaling what was to come. Because Nectar, his second studio album, came out in September 2020, and it was huge. He had collaborations with very famous people, and it was just extremely popular. And you have to remember, at this time, COVID was out, but he still did it. So, a brave decision by him, still kind of not knowing where the world was going to go at that time. But he did it, and I think it definitely paid off. And then in June of 2022, he released the single Glimpse of Us, which was, that was massive. It peaked at number 8. And then the single Die For You was the second single on his third album called Smithereens. His tours are all over, they're massive. And really, why am I talking about him today? Well, to me, it just kind of showed the crazy direction his life has gone. Where first he was promoting that Harlem Shake, thing, to think that he was one of the first creators to make it massive. Then he creates these weird, obscure characters on YouTube that are very controversial, but people loved it. And then to abruptly say, you know what, I don't want to do this career anymore. I want to make music, and I want to make serious music as well, is just extremely brave. It takes a lot of guts, and you gotta believe in yourself, for it to work. And it paid out for him. He's one of the biggest creators, especially amongst YouTube nowadays. And if you haven't listened to his music, please, 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 I beg of you, please listen to Slow Dancing in the Dark, Sanctuary, Glimpse of Us. You won't be disappointed. And even the little hits as well that I didn't get to mention, such as Gimme Love, Yukon, his World Star song as well. So, there's so much. There's just so much you got to listen to. And that's it for Joji. I think there's still a lot more for him to come that we're going to be listening to pretty soon. And this is it for me for this week. Please listen to Joji if you haven't, and I'll talk to you all later. Peace.